I just want to thank all of you that have stuck around this far, that have followed this series. This has been a long time coming to get this paint prep done, and we're not quite ready for primer, but I promise this is the last video before we get there. And so what that means is we have a lot of little things to do. We're going to be scuffing, we're going to be scraping all the seams to get everything cleaned up. We've got a patch we need to make for a hole in the side, and just kind of general stuff like that. So follow along. This is going to be the final paint prep video. Okay, now that the paint is officially stripped off the trailer, the next step is doing some more detail work to get this thing prepped for paint. So what that's going to mean is going through all the different seams and checking to make sure everything's clean. The original plan here was to caulk and then paint. However, at this point, fall's coming fast. Temperatures are going to be a problem at a certain point here. And so I'm going to try to get this sprayed next week. It's the beginning of October. It's going to be the middle of October soon. I'm just worried if I push this too much further, I'm not going to be able to get primer on this year. And the caulk that I'm going to use, Lexel, is saying that it needs 3 to 4 weeks to cure before I put this paint on it. So to be safe, we're going to go ahead and prime it and then caulk the seams on top of that. It's not ideal. But there's a lot of little things to happen before we can actually prime. So let me show you what we're working on. All right, so you can see this is one of the aluminum trim strips. This would normally have a cover over it that's been removed. I've stripped most of the paint out of these. I just used like a nylon brush and stripper. These are all gonna be covered, so I was not super duper careful here, but I did get most of it out just because it was bothering my OCD, to be honest. It also helped to clean some of the paint off of this top edge. And so what we're trying to do now, this is either butyl tape or sealant of some sort that was behind this, this trim, and where this piece of metal on the top overlaps this piece of metal is what this is for. So there are some spots where you can actually see the overlap. Here's side to side overlap, but these trims are to cover any overlapping metal. So from what I can tell, this has been lapped the way it should. So this bottom piece is underneath the top piece. So if this sealant were to fail and water got behind there, it would in theory roll onto the bottom piece and be fine. However, there are a lot of screw holes. So this sealant is keeping water out of those screw holes. And so we're going to replace it. This is not going to take paint very well, and while this is mostly covered by the trim, you can see down in there. So what I'm doing is using a series of screwdrivers and scrapers and knives to take it from that to something more like this. It's not perfect, but it is quite a bit better. It's smoother. We have more metal to bond to, and then we'll caulk after we prime. Finally, after that, we're going to come through and take another look at our windows. We did this a while back. You can see there's butyl tape that has oozed out the side, which is good. The summer heat has pushed it out, but this all has to get cut back because this is also going to get caulked in here. So we're going to cut this back behind the window. We're going to tape all of it off, and then after we've painted, we'll come along and caulk all those as well. So we're getting there. There's quite a bit of scraping. I've been at it for about 5 days after work. Just been taking half days and working on this, trying to get these edges clean. So you can see it's really starting to look good here. And a lot of these seams are looking really clean. So we're just gonna keep doing this. Up top here, this rail that is for the awning is pretty on there, and so I'm not forcing it off. I'm just going to tape it off. But there is silicone on top of that took forever to get off. It's just cleaning around the doors and every single opening, trying to get that clean, get all the paint stripped off. I still have, you can kind of see in here, there's some of the old paint. I'm not too worried about that. I'm trying to get as much as I can of that. But we're going to deal with the inside of the door at a later time. But then even up underneath, like these rain grip guards or whatever you call them, there's paint up in there that had to come out. So there's quite a few spots, especially on this side and on the back, just going around, like this door, this access door, that all had to be cleaned up. So working through it little by little. I'm going to keep scraping here, and then next step is going to be to scuff the whole trailer. I've done that a little bit on the front here. We're going to scuff the whole trailer with red Scotch-Brite pads. We're going to clean it with mineral spirits, and then I think we're going to be ready to prime this thing. All right, so I want to show you guys some of the tools that I'm using to get this done. This scraping is just kind of weird. Like, every spot's a little different. Some spots have silicone, which acts differently than what I imagine is butyl tape that's sticking out the back. My lovely wife running through the back here. But I found that there's a lot of different ways to deal with this, and so I just want to show you guys a couple of those things. Anyway, I have found, I started with using a putty knife and that wasn't working so great. So I've switched to using screwdrivers because that just seems to work better. So I started with just a flathead screwdriver, which I am absolutely going to ruin on this project, but and basically just kind of coming into the seam and just scraping. I was working, but it was taking forever. And this profile has kind of a little hook on the edge, which is what the trim attaches to. And most of the sealant is in that low spot. So I've actually switched to a real tiny little kind of precision screwdriver, and that's been doing most of the scraping really well. I can get a lot of pressure in that little spot. So what I've been doing is taking a utility knife and essentially cutting the bottom edge of that sealant as best I can to the metal. And then I swap to a scraper with a single edge razor blade, and I get that from the top and cut down as flush to the metal as I can. Once that happens, I take a screwdriver, take another screwdriver, and scrape out that big chunk, and that takes out like a pretty nice piece usually. Just kind of takes out like a corner of sealant and gets that out of the way. But it leaves behind quite a bit, and that's where this comes in. And so then it honestly, it's just brute force of just sitting here scraping away with this little precision screwdriver, getting all of that sealant out of there. So it takes forever. There's just no way to make this fast. Once we go through with all that, I've been taking a red Scotch-Brite pad and just coming through and just cleaning up the metal a little bit. It helps kind of give it a finished edge. This is awful. This is just days and days and days of scraping, and I'm consolidating into it just a short time for you guys so you can see what I'm doing. But the entirety of this video, between the stripping paint and all the scraping, is months and months of work. I think probably I started in like May or June, and it's October 2nd right now. So this is like 4 to 6 months of hard work anytime I had free time. So just recognize, if you're going to get into this kind of project, a lot of time is going to be invested, and it's a little nerve-wracking because with all this time invested, we're going to spray this with primer, and if that gets messed up, then the process almost restarts. So I'm excited to get primer in this, but I'm also a little nervous. So I'm gonna keep scraping, and we'll get this thing the rest of the way prepped, and then we'll transition to the windows and take a look at how we're gonna do that. Okay, so one of the last major steps before we get the primer on is gonna be kind of cleaning up these windows a little bit. You can see here, this butyl tape is sticking out the bottom here. And so what I'm having to do is trim that back. I'm really thankful that today is a cooler day, because I've tried to do this on hot days and this stuff is so sticky that it's almost impossible. But it's like low 70s today, so I've been finding just the utility knife and some patience is working pretty well. So what I'm doing is making several passes over the same place to try to loosen it up without having to push too hard and cut through the aluminum. And I am maintaining a slight back cut, meaning I'm angling a little toward the middle of the window so that there's room for caulk on the outside of this eventually. So I find if I do that a few times and I can get it started, I can then just keep working my way down and peeling this out. Some places this works better than others. It is very, very sticky. So what I'm trying to do, you can see this is just stretching. I'm trying to keep it in a ball because the stuff likes to stick to itself more than it does to me, thankfully. And so we're just working our way around here. There's really nothing to it but just to do it. And so you can see like I've got some remnants. It's kind of hard to see in here, but there's some remnants staying behind. And we'll go back and try to clean them up. It really is best if you can get it all as one piece. So it's starting to rain here, so I'm gonna take a little break, but we'll come back to this and get all these windows trimmed up. Alright, I'm real happy with how that turned out. It's 040 aluminum. You can see the butyl tape back in there. It's not completely compressed, but we'll caulk this like we're going to caulk the windows. But I was really worried about making something there that would be secure and not look like an accident. And I think that's mission accomplished there. Very happy with how that turned out. It makes me even consider about potentially putting one here. This is the old furnace opening, and I was going to put a sprayer there for washing stuff off, but that turned out so nice I may reconsider. Overall, that was nice and easy. All right, it is the day before I'm going to prime this camper finally after months and months of stripping paint. Today what we're going to have to do is scuff the entire thing. I scuffed around the windows when I took them out, but I got to a point where it was just taking too long, and I really just wanted to get the paint off just from like a mental, like I'm accomplishing something perspective. I needed to have some forward progress. So I did not clean up everything perfect, and so there's still a couple little spots of paint, and we just need to go over everything with some red Scotch-Brite pads and just get a good scuff on this. That'll really help our epoxy primer stick to it, and it'll just give it a nice even surface. So this is going to be an all-day thing. I'm going to just start on one side and just kind of work my way around. like I said, this is our last video before primer. So hang tight. Coming soon is going to be that video. We're going to explain the products we use, the method we use, the compressor setup and spray gun, some of those details, and hopefully we're going to get this thing all gray and protected before the winter.